My mother wrote me letters before she died. Not one letter, letters. Plural, planned in advance, written over the last 14 months of her life, sealed individually and labeled in her handwriting. One for my high school graduation, one for the first time I had my heart broken, one for my college graduation, one for my wedding day, one if I ever had children, one for the hardest day of my life. She didn't know what that day would be, she just knew it would come, and she wanted to be there for it. 6 letters, sealed, labeled, left in a box that my father promised me in the specific way that people make promises at hospital bedsides when they understand that the person listening needs to believe them, would always be mine. The box stays, he said. I'll never touch it. He kept that promise for 9 years. Then he remarried. And 14 months after the wedding, his new wife decided to declutter. I found out on a Tuesday evening, scrolling through a local Facebook resale group, when I saw a listing for a vintage keepsake box with handwritten letters. Beautiful condition, $15 for the lot. The photo showed my mother's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. The specific way she looped her lowercase l, the careful, deliberate script she used when something mattered. The listing had been up for 6 hours. The buyer had already paid. She was driving through from Ohio and was leaving the state in 36 hours. What I did in those 36 hours, every call, every decision, every moment, is the reason I'm sitting here telling you this story. And I want to be clear about something before we go any further. I got the letters back, but what I found when I opened them, and what I did with what my stepmother had done, changed my family in ways that are still unfolding. In about 70 minutes, you'll understand everything. My name is Lily. I'm 30 years old. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, where I've been for the past 4 years. I work as a freelance graphic designer. Steady work, good clients, a career I built from scratch that belongs entirely to me, which matters more than it might sound given the rest of this story. My mother's name was Carol. She died when I was 16 from ovarian cancer. She was 44. The diagnosis came when I was 15, and the 14 months between that first appointment and the last one were, in a very specific way, the months that made me who I am. Watching someone you love manage their own dying with that much grace and deliberateness, it leaves a mark. Not just grief, something more instructive than that. A template for how to be inside difficulty. She was the kind of woman who made plans, who thought ahead, who believed that love, to be useful, needed to be concrete, not just felt, but expressed in forms that outlasted the moment. The letters were typical of her. She wrote them over 14 months in the evenings when she felt well enough to sit at her desk. She told me about them near the end. She said, "I wrote you some things for later, for the moments I'm going to miss. Dad knows where they are. You'll get them when you need them." I was 16. I nodded, I held her hand, I couldn't think about later. After she passed, my father, his name is Dennis, found the box in her desk drawer. He showed it to me briefly at the kitchen table, 6 envelopes, each one labeled in her handwriting. He put it back in the drawer and said, "This is yours when you're ready. I'm not going to touch it." And he didn't. For 9 years, my father was, in the specific way of widowers who are quietly destroyed by loss, present without being fully there. He went to work, he paid the bills, he came to my high school graduation without giving me the letter because I wasn't ready to read it alone and the moment felt too raw, but he was there. He drove me to college, he called on Sunday evenings with brief factual updates about the house and the neighborhood and his work. He was not a bad father. He was a man who had lost his person and had not fully recovered and was managing the distance between himself and the world with the tools available to him. Those tools did not include processing his grief, which meant that when a woman named Renata appeared in his life 5 years after my mother died, he was available to be remade, significantly remade, in ways I watched with the specific disorientation of a child who has been hoping, without admitting it, that the version of her father who existed before the loss was still in there somewhere. Renata is 52. She's energetic, opinionated, and has very clear ideas about how things should look. She decorates aggressively. My mother's careful, quiet aesthetic was replaced within the first year of the marriage by something louder and more curated. She refers to herself without apparent self-consciousness as a fresh start person. She is not a villain in the cinematic sense. She is someone who arrived in a house that held a dead woman's presence in every corner and decided, practically and without sufficient sensitivity, to make it her own. I understood that impulse. I did not like what it produced. The decluttering had happened in phases. First the living room, then the kitchen, then the garage. Each time my father mentioned it, he framed it as, "My and Renata are making changes," which I understood as code for Renata is making changes and I am allowing it. I had taken most of what mattered from my childhood home years earlier. Photos, a few of my mother's books, some small objects. But the box had stayed in the drawer where my father kept it. I hadn't been ready to take it. I was waiting for a moment that felt right to receive it. I had waited too long. I want to tell you about the specific experience of recognizing your mother's handwriting in a Facebook resale listing. It is a very particular kind of shock, not the loud, sudden kind, the quiet kind, the kind that starts in your chest and radiates outward very slowly, like cold water, until everything feels slightly unreal. I was sitting on my couch on a Tuesday evening. I had been scrolling through the local buy-sell trade group. I sometimes find vintage design pieces there for reference work. The listing was not targeted at me. There was no reason for it to appear in my feed except the ordinary randomness of an algorithm. The headline said, "Vintage keepsake box with handwritten letters, great condition, $15 for the lot, buyer already confirmed, pickup only." There was one photo. The box was open. 4 of the 6 envelopes were visible. The labels were partially readable. I could see my name on one of them, Lily, and the looping L. I sat very still for about 10 seconds. Then I clicked on the seller's profile. The profile was under a name I didn't recognize, a woman named Sandra from the town where my father lived. I looked at the account. It had been created 8 months ago. The profile photo was a generic landscape. I looked at the listing again. Buyer already confirmed, pickup only. I commented on the post, "Hi, I think this box may have belonged to my late mother. Is there any way to reach the buyer? Please message me." Then I called my father. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Lily, hi. Dad, where's the box? Mom's letter box, the one in the desk drawer." A pause. A very specific kind of pause. "Oh, Renata was doing some clearing out. I think it might have gone in the sale pile." I want to tell you what I felt in that moment, because I think it matters that it was not only grief. It was also a kind of confirmation, the arrival of something I had been bracing for without naming it. The understanding that the years of standing to the side while Renata made the house her own had been moving toward a moment like this one. That the box, which I had left there too long, which I had trusted to a promise made at a hospital bedside, had been waiting in a drawer for me to be ready, and I had not been ready in time. "Dad," I said, "she sold it. Someone bought it already. Mom's letters are in a Facebook resale listing for $15. The silence on the line was different from the previous one. What? $15. Buyer already confirmed. The buyer is leaving the state in approximately 36 hours. Nothing. I need to know if Renata has the buyer's contact information. My father called Renata. The conversation relayed to me in pieces over the following hour went approximately like this. Renata had organized an estate sale 2 weeks earlier while my father was at a conference. She had gone through the house systematically. She had found the box in the desk drawer. She had apparently opened it, seen handwritten letters, and concluded that they were old correspondence, her words, that could go in the sale. She had not read the labels. Or she had read them and not understood what they were. I have spent considerable time in therapy working through which of those 2 possibilities is true and whether it changes what I feel about what happened. The honest answer is, it doesn't change it much. Either she was careless with something she should have asked about, or she saw my name on those envelopes and sold them anyway. Both are a version of the same fundamental problem. The buyer, Her name, I learned through Renata's Facebook message chain, was Patricia. She had driven from Columbus, Ohio to visit family in Nashville for the week. She had seen the listing, paid the $15, and picked up the box 2 days prior. She was heading home on Thursday morning. I had until Thursday morning. It was Tuesday night. I messaged the seller, Sandra, who turned out to be Renata's friend who had listed items on her behalf, and explained the situation. I told her the letters were written by my late mother to me for specific life milestones. I asked for Patricia's contact information. Sandra took 4 hours to respond. Those were the 4 longest hours of my life in recent memory. I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my phone, and I did something that I recognized even in the moment as both necessary and slightly wild, which was to write down, from memory, every detail I could remember about the labels on the envelopes, what my mother's handwriting looked like, the specific phrases she used when she labeled things, the color of the ink, blue, a particular shade of blue from the pen she kept in her desk holder, the pen I had seen in her hand 1,000 times. I wrote all of it down, because if I could not get the box back, I wanted at least to have that, the memory of what she had made for me, documented in my own hand as precisely as I could hold it. Sandra messaged me at 1:47 in the morning. She gave me Patricia's phone number. I called at 7 the next morning. Patricia picked up on the second ring. I told her who I was. I told her about my mother. I told her what the letters were. I told her that my mother had died when I was 16 and written those letters over the last 14 months of her life for the milestone she knew she would miss. Patricia was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was different from how it had been when she first said hello. "I didn't read them," she said. "I just thought they were beautiful. The box was beautiful. I didn't open anything. I know, this isn't your fault at all. You bought something in good faith. I need to know if there's any way to get them back." Another long pause. "How far are you from the east side of Nashville?" "About 20 minutes. I'm at my cousin's house. I can meet you this afternoon." I drove across Nashville in 38 minutes, which tells you something about how I was driving, and I met Patricia in a coffee shop parking lot, and she handed me the box through my car window, and I gave her $60, 4 times what she'd paid, because she had driven across a parking lot to give me the piece of my mother that someone put a $15 price tag on. And she said, "I'm so sorry for what you've been through." And I said, "Thank you for picking up the phone." I drove home. I sat in my car in my driveway for about 15 minutes, and then I went inside, and I sat at my kitchen table, and I opened the first envelope. I want to ask you something right now. If you had found out that something irreplaceable, something your lost parent had made specifically for you, had been sold without anyone asking you, what would you have done first? Called the buyer? Called your father? Done something else entirely? Drop it in the comments, because the sequence of those calls matters, and I made choices about the order that I've thought about many times since. I am not going to tell you everything in those letters. They belong to me. They have always belonged to me, and they are the most private things I own. But I want to tell you enough, because this story is not just about getting the box back. It is about what was inside it. And what happened when I finally read what my mother had written, alone at my kitchen table in Nashville at 30 years old, 14 years after she died, changed something in me that I think needed to change. The graduation letter was the first one I opened. High school graduation. She had written it when she was still relatively well. The handwriting was steady, full of her. She described the day I was born. She described watching me figure things out, how I approached problems, how I handled difficulty. She said, "You have always done the hard thing, not because you had to, because you understood that doing it made you more you. I am so proud of that. I am so proud of you." I read it 3 times. I opened the college graduation letter next. Her handwriting was different in this one. Still hers, but more careful, more deliberate. She wrote it later in her illness. She talked about what she hoped for me in the years ahead, not ambitions specifically, but the texture of a life. She hoped I would have people around me who made me feel seen. She hoped I would find work that felt like mine. She hoped, and this line I have memorized because I have read it so many times, that I would learn to ask for what you deserve without apologizing for needing it. Ask for what you deserve without apologizing for needing it. I sat with that for a long time because I am 30 years old and I am still learning to do that. And she knew, at 43, writing in a careful hand with a blue pen, that it was the thing I would need to learn. She knew me well enough to trust it into a letter for a graduation she would miss, and to trust that it would still be true when I got there. I didn't open the rest that day. I needed to let those two settle first. I put the box in my closet, my apartment, my space where nothing would be sold or decluttered or given a $15 price tag, and I went for a walk, and I thought about what I needed to do next. Right here, I have the box. I have read 2 of my mother's letters. I know what she wrote. I know what was almost lost. I know what Renata put in an estate sale for $15. But here's what I haven't told you yet. When Sandra, Renata's friend who posted the listing, finally messaged me back, she included something I hadn't asked for. A screenshot from Renata's own messages to her from 2 weeks earlier, giving her the items to list. In that screenshot, Renata had listed the box specifically. She had described it as box of old letters, probably junk, $10 minimum. Probably junk. She had seen the box. She had seen the labels. She had described it as probably junk. And what I did with that screenshot, calmly, precisely, without raising my voice once, is what I need to tell you. Before I do, if this story is hitting something real, if you have ever had something precious, a person, an object, a memory, a piece of someone you lost, treated as disposable by someone who should have known better, hit subscribe right now. I make a new story like this every single week about families, about loss, about the things we owe each other, and what happens when someone fails that obligation. Subscribe. And then stay, because the screenshot changed everything. I sat with the screenshot for 3 days. Not because I was uncertain about what it meant. I understood exactly what it meant the moment I read it. Probably junk. She had seen the box, seen the labels, understood enough to know it contained old letters, and decided they were worth listing at $10 minimum. I sat with it for 3 days because I wanted to be certain about what I was going to do with it before I did anything. This is the thing that I think distinguishes a decision from a reaction. A reaction happens in the moment, driven by the feeling. A decision happens after the feeling has been allowed to exist fully, examined, and used to inform something deliberate. I was angry. I want to say that clearly. I was genuinely, specifically, entirely justified in being angry. That anger was real and valid, and I did not suppress it or manage it or tell myself it was too much. I felt it. And then, on day 3, I picked up the phone. I called my father, not to yell, not to list grievances, not to perform my grief for an audience of one, to say one thing clearly. Dad, I got the letters back. I want you to know they're safe. He exhaled. Lily, I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was going to. I know. I believe you. But I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to it all before you say anything. I have a screenshot from Renata's messages to the woman who listed the sale. It describes the box as old letters, probably junk. She saw it, Dad. She saw the labels. She knew it was a box of letters, and she listed it. Silence. I'm not calling to tell you what to do with that, That's between you and your wife, but I need you to understand that what happened was not an accident of oversight. It was a choice. And I needed you to know I know that. More silence. I also want to tell you something else. I paused. I read 2 of the letters, and she was extraordinary, Dad. She wrote things I'm still processing, and they almost didn't exist for me anymore. They came within 36 hours and a chance Facebook scroll of being gone forever. I need you to understand what that means. His voice, when he spoke, was different from any version of it I had heard in years. I know, he said. I know. Then I said the part that I had been preparing for 3 days. I'm not coming back to that house while her things continue to be treated as clutter. I'm not saying I'm ending our relationship. I'm saying I need a boundary, clearly stated. When and if you're ready to talk about what happened and what changes, I'll be here. But I'm not going to absorb this quietly and show up for Christmas like it didn't happen. He didn't argue. He said, I understand. I sent him the screenshot by email after we hung up. Not as a weapon, as documentation, so that the conversation we'd had couldn't later be revised into something softer. I noted the date and time of the call in my phone, and then I made one more contact. I sent Renata a message. 4 sentences. Renata, I retrieved my mother's letters. I have documentation of how the box was described in your sale instructions. I want you to know, and that I will not be pretending otherwise going forward. I did not ask for an apology. I did not threaten anything. I simply stated what was true. That was all. My father called me 2 days later. The conversation lasted 41 minutes, which is the longest phone call we have had in 14 years. I know that because my call log told me, and because I noted it, and because the fact of that number, 41 minutes, longer than almost any conversation since my mother died, is the thing that holds the rest of what happened in the right context. He did not begin with Renata. He began with my mother. He told me things about the last months of her life that I had been too young to hold at 16, and that he had never found the right moment to share since. He told me about the night she told him about the letters, how she had brought it up matter-of-factly over dinner, the way she handled most hard things, and how he had cried in a way that surprised even him. He told me she had said, "Don't be sad. These are the most useful thing I can do from here." The most useful thing I can do from here. That's my mother. That's exactly her. He talked for 20 minutes before he mentioned Renata. When he did, he said, I showed her the message you sent, and I showed her the screenshot, and I told her what was in the letters. Not the specifics, just what they were, what your mom had made. How did she respond? A pause. She cried, he said, and I think it landed differently when she understood. Not that it's an excuse, but I think she genuinely did not understand what she was looking at. I sat with that. That doesn't fix it, I said. No, he said, it doesn't, but it's information. Yes, he said, it's information. My Aunt Karen, my mother's older sister, who had known about the letters since my mother first mentioned writing them, and who had been in the years since a careful keeper of my mother's memory, called me a week after my conversation with my father. She had heard. My father had called her, apparently, which surprised me. He doesn't usually reach out to my mother's family. The fact that he did told me something about where he was sitting with all of it. I told him what happened, Karen said, with the box and the letters. Yes, your mother told me about those letters when she wrote them. She described every one. She said, and I remember this exactly, I want her to have something from me at the moments she'll need it most. I want to be there even when I can't be there. I pressed my lips together. She would be proud of how you handled this, Karen said, driving across Nashville at 7 a.m, not screaming at anyone, just going and getting it. I was pretty close to screaming, I said, but I didn't. No, I didn't. Karen was quiet for a moment. Has anyone ever done something like that for you? The stranger or the almost stranger who showed up without being asked? Tell me in the comments, because I think those moments, the accidental kindnesses from people who owe us nothing, are the ones that hold us together in ways we don't fully understand until much later. I have read 4 of the 6 letters now. The 1 for the first time I had my heart broken, the 2 graduations, the 1 for the hardest day of my life. That last one I opened 6 months after I got the box back, on a day that earned it. I won't tell you what was in it, not because it's not part of the story, but because some things belong only to the person they were written for. I will tell you that my mother, writing with a careful hand from a place she knew she was leaving, somehow found the exact right words for a day she couldn't have predicted. That is either a coincidence or evidence of how well she knew me. I have decided it is the second thing. 2 letters remain sealed. 1 for my wedding day, 1 for if I ever have children. They are in the box. The box is on a shelf in my apartment. Not hidden, visible. A specific, intentional visible, because I am done keeping the things that matter to me in drawers I trust other people to protect. They are mine. They are where I can see them. That is not a small thing. It has been 11 months since the Tuesday night I found the Facebook listing. In 11 months, here is what I know. I know that my mother was more present in that box than I had let myself understand for 14 years. I had known the letters existed. I had known, abstractly, that they were waiting. But I had been managing my grief at a distance, keeping it in a drawer in my father's house, treating it as something I would access when I was ready, without fully acknowledging that readiness is a choice and not a condition. I was 30 years old. I had been not ready for 14 years. Getting the box back forced the readiness. And what I found when I read her was not grief, exactly, or not only grief. It was also a kind of conversation. A long-delayed, necessary conversation with a person I had loved and missed and idealized in ways that, my therapist has pointed out, prevented me from knowing her fully. My therapist, Dr. Reyes, who works in grief and family trauma, talks about something she calls anticipatory inheritance. The things we expect to receive from the people we've lost, their wisdom, their permission, their acknowledgement, and how the absence of those things creates gaps in our development that we fill, imperfectly, with other people's expectations. I had been filling the gap my mother left with the expectations of everyone around me. My father's need for me to be low maintenance, Renata's need for the house to be unencumbered by the previous wife's presence, the family's collective need for the loss to be something we moved past rather than something we moved through. I had been accommodating all of it. And my mother, from 14 months of careful letter writing, had given me permission to stop. Ask for what you deserve without apologizing for needing it. That line. I have taped it to my bathroom mirror. I did not ask for an apology from Renata, but I stopped pretending the situation was fine. I stopped absorbing the slow erasure of my mother's presence with the practiced quietness of someone who has been trained not to make things difficult. I told the truth. I drew the line. I went across Nashville in 38 minutes to get what was mine. My relationship with my father is different now. Not perfect. The 41-minute call was a beginning, not a resolution, and some of what needs to be said between us will take years rather than months to find its way to the surface. But it is more honest. And honesty, even when it arrives too late and costs something, is better than the alternative. I have not seen Renata since before the incident. I don't know yet what that relationship looks like going forward. I know what it cannot look like me pretending, cannot look like the easy warmth of someone who has decided not to notice what has been done. What it might become, I don't yet know. I'm leaving that question open. I want to say something to you before we close. If you have someone in your life who is gone, a parent, a grandparent, a person who made something for you, or left something for you, or wanted to be part of your future in some form, I want to ask you one question. Where is that thing right now? The letters, the object, the recording, the photograph, the recipe in their handwriting, whatever form their intention took. Do you know where it is? Is it somewhere you can see it? because I left mine in a drawer I trusted to a promise made at a hospital bedside, and I almost lost it for $15. The things that people who love us make for us, with intention, with time, with the full weight of knowing they won't be there, do not become less precious because we're not ready for them yet. Get them. Put them somewhere you can see them. You don't have to open them until you're ready, but make sure they're yours. Maybe you're living a version of this. Maybe the drawer is different. Maybe it's not letters, maybe it's a recipe or a piece of jewelry or a journal you keep meaning to read. Maybe it's something someone made for you that you've been protecting by not looking at it, managing the grief at a distance, telling yourself that when the time is right, you'll go get it. The time is right. Don't wait for the Facebook listing. One final question. When you find out that something irreplaceable was treated as disposable by someone who should have known better, do you confront them directly? Do you document and say nothing? Do you do what I did? Say exactly what happened, exactly what you know, and then stop absorbing. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if the story meant something to you, hit the like button. Share it with someone who has something precious sitting in a drawer somewhere. And subscribe, because I'll be here next week with another one. There is a story in the description I think you'll need just as much as this one. I'll see you in the next one.